Hi, thanks for coming to my show.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for the invite.
So,
Nice to
uh,
meet you.
nice to meet you, Pedro. Firstly, I want to introduce you to my audience. I thought I have gone through your profile. I can see you're doing a lot of work, so I thought to tell about your work to my audience.
So do you want me to introduce myself?
Yeah, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I've been uh, developing software for the last, I think it's more than 15 years, especially mobile. Um, with that, I've been working with a lot of teams, both doing software and doing volunteering on a couple of other things like summer camps, teaching, and other stuff, which led me to kind of going to my other passion besides technology, which is people. And there I started to do some training on teams, on feedback. And I also created a small, during COVID, a small, I wouldn't call it a non-volunteering group, but kind of a small initiative to gather funds for people or associations that were helping people during COVID, and we did a small live show on YouTube, hitting spicy stuff and collecting donations. So I guess it's me on kind of a 30 seconds or something like that.
So, you are from?
I'm from Portugal.
So you are into software from long time. So what kind of work you have done?
So I've worked on multiple mobile apps, so Android mainly worked. So when Android came up, I think it was June 20, uh, '08, something like that, that Android was launched. So I was working on that the year following, pretty much. Well, I guess the same year that it was launched, I was playing with it, then got some projects and then worked for a couple of companies that did like telco companies that were doing the first apps for customer support, for kind of an ATM on your phone kind of thing. And then from there, I guess it went to a couple of other things from fashion to retail. Um, I guess the last years, I guess the last 5 or so years, I've been focusing more on retail apps, working through Mindera, the company that I've worked with, which is works in self-organization, which is kind of interesting topic also. So I've been working at that.
So apart from your work in software, you do different works. So what makes you to do all those things?
I don't know. I guess I get bored if I do the same things every day. And besides it, I guess I get the feeling of why not, right? So why shouldn't I try different things? And I believe a lot in experimentation. So this kind of looking at life from a scientific method. So if I believe something, and I believe something will help on a team or with a group of individuals or in an organization, why shouldn't I try it and see if it works or not? And if it does, great, I'm improving whatever is out there. If it doesn't help, actually I learned why it didn't help, because basically when you fail, it's probably when you actually learn something, much more than when you succeed. So I address that a lot. So, and fortunately, kind of for the past 8 years, I have the luck of having a lot of freedom in terms of things I want to implement even professionally. So I think that was it.
So working on different applications, it can be mobile or web applications. I'm sure you might have learned a lot of technical skills.
Yeah. So Yeah, so I think technology, once you learn to develop on a single language, develop well. Is it even if it's C, if it's C++, if it's Java, if it's Kotlin, whatever it is, more than the language itself, you learn kind of how to think, like how to be structured in your thought process, how to think of edge cases, and so on. So yes, I can guess I can. For the last 15 years, I've grabbed a lot of knowledge in terms of Java, Kotlin, learn a bit about C, C++. But I think the common pattern there is just how you think. And when you get to that point where you kind of had enough practice in a lot of different languages, you then, a new language is just trying to understand how it kind of models your thought process, and then it gets easier. Of course, each framework, so mobile is a very different thing from developing, for example, backend, which I did also. So you also need to, if you're going into software development for serious, or if you want to do it in your life, you'll want to kind of understand your ecosystem. What does that mean? So Android, for example, has a lot of Google ecosystem around, and now JetBrains also. So you need to go deep dive into that. But I guess this kind of happens with every thing that you do. If you want to get good at it, you'll deep dive into it, right?
So working for applications which belongs to different industries, how is that?
I guess overall it's not very different. I guess the fintech industry is probably the one that is a little bit more, I'd say, a little different because it has much more security and it has much more constraints when you're developing. Banking for a long time was using very kind of old systems and legacy stuff because they were resisting change because it introduces risk and so on and so forth. So I guess that's from the things that I've worked. That's the main difference. The rest of it, I guess it's more or less the same. So the business is a little different, but at the end, what the business is searching for when someone asks me to develop an app, they normally what they want is to sell something, right? So it doesn't matter if it's really bananas or if it's clothes, right? So it's just the UI or the UX that changes, but the overall experience that you need to provide, you need to have a fast app, you need to develop proper code that scales. So it's not very different, I'd say.
And you are your father of three technophile.
Yeah. So I have three kids, which are is right. So um, one of the actual things that I try to help them with is for them to understand that to if they want to learn stuff about technology, every kid wants to play games, right? That. Like Khan Academy is a great example of that that I use a lot with them. But you can play around with Scratch, for example, to learn to teach your kids how to develop soon. Because more than development, I guess development is not my main goal. I don't mind if they're programmers or if they're something else. What is useful for their lives is how to think. And how to think is something that you can apply to any profession that you're at. So either you're a plumber or you're a software developer, if your thought process is good enough, that will really help you in your life. So that's what I'm trying to teach at them. And I think that's one side of technology. Of course, you have TikTok and Facebook and Twitter and a lot of things that entertain you, but can also distract you. So I think that's something to be careful around kids and adults because we're pretty much the same. It's just that we normally have more control over our actions or not. That can also be an interesting discussion. But overall, that's what I attempt to do: teach them things that are going to be useful in their lifetime.
So being a Java developer, so and working in it, so what you have understood and how well you have used it for different businesses that you worked for.
So disclaimer, I've been, I think for the last, I guess, 3 or 4 years, I've been focusing almost only on Kotlin, but yeah, the beginning of my career was Java. Um, so I guess one of the interesting things, so let's deep dive into Java then. One of the interesting things, I was a teacher of computer science also, and I taught Java, so mobile applications in Java. So one of the interesting things is a lot of faculties and boot camps and so on teach Java just because it's simple enough. So it's pretty easy to teach. Um, you have a simple syntax, although a lot of very verbose. So that really was painful for me while I was teaching. Um, was that I felt that normally a lot of places where they thought they were going to where they told you that they're going to teach you to program, they would only teach you kind of, I don't know, the basics. If whenever you wanted to ask, okay, how does the virtual machine work? If you allocate a string, where does that pan out in memory? Or why is it string immutable? Or I don't know, why, a lot of different things they didn't know. And that was really, it really hurt me when I caught a lot of students that really thought they knew how to develop, and then they got kind of really reality check. So back to your question on kind of what did I caught up in all my years developing. So first of all, I think being humble. I think I've always caught people working with me that with more or less experience than me in terms of years always knew something that I didn't. So that's the first thing that I got in all those years from very early. Second thing is, don't just kind of know the broad strokes in a language. Go deep, like how does actually Java work? Where does it store things in memory? How does that actually work? So I have an interesting story. So while I was developing a retail app, we were using a technology called RxJava. And RxJava is kind of a way to do concurrent. Let's keep it not very nerdy, but um, it's a way to do concurrent operations. Let's look at it that way. So you can kind of do multiple requests at the same time and so on. And it provides you with a couple of ways to do that. And you can do operations on that to kind of do multiple kind of, you do a fetch of the network, and then you can get the data and do multiple things over it until it outputs the result. Okay. One of the things that we were doing was using RxJava with kind of a pool that was called IO. IO is kind of the default pool for input output of RxJava. So sometimes we were getting in production um, out of memory error that for people that developed in virtual machines languages like Java, you get a lot. And it was, so none of us could replicate that, and it was getting really annoying because we were getting frequent reports of that. So it's an app that had millions of users, so I wouldn't say that there was a lot of people being affected, but let's call it 50 people being affected. It's not huge in terms of 1 million or 2 million to 50, but still it was a huge number for us. So after deep digging a lot into the code, nobody saw an issue. And I just sit for hours looking at our architecture diagram. So what is wrong with this? Where can this be crashing? And suddenly got to me, okay, we're using the IO. Actually, that's a thread pool in kind of behind it. How many threads is this pulling? So basically that was kind of a huge thread pool that had basically no limit. So what that meant, I'm not sure how technically you are, but kind of maintaining this very non-nerdy. Basically, for every request we're doing, we were basically spawning a thread, so a worker that was going to do something. And if you jump from screen to screen very quickly, if you're just playing around on the app, suddenly you're just spawning workers and workers and workers. And done their job. So it keeps growing, 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 and then it crashed on that. Um, and initially, when I pointed out that, nobody thought, okay, it isn't that. Of course it isn't. So we're using the default thing. Everybody uses that. And after a quick testing and experimentation, it was that. So I guess the moral of the story is deep dive into things and kind of using just default stuff and stuff that you even stuff that you see that is common to be used may get you into real trouble if you're developing things at scale.
So, developing different softwares and working for different projects. So overall, in this 15 years, how this software is helping humans to solve their problems.
How is software helping humans? Well, it depends on how you look at it. So you can say that software is starting to help more with the kind of ChatGPT and stuff like AI and chatbots and stuff like that, where you can ask a question in natural language and then it returns you whatever you want. Kind of, it may hit or miss in terms of what you want, but it's returning you some. If computers went down across the world, pretty much everything would stop working because so water centrals are managed by computers, electricity is managed by computers. So basically, most of the societies in most countries, I'd say, are pretty much on top of technology. And although they're redundant and so on, if they fail, I think as a society we wouldn't be prepared for that because those are vital systems at this point. So I guess if you look at it that way, technology is really helping doing everything at this point. I
So
think
you worked on Java.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you
go ahead.
worked on you have worked on Java as a Java developer in different companies in your experience. So how is working in different companies and working with different clients?
Huh, that's an interesting question. So I've worked in a couple of companies that have a pretty standard approach to it, like a normal pyramid, where you have the CEO, then the CTO, and then whatever, and then you have managers, middle management, and then you have people working, and has several layers on that. Um, and my last company where currently working at, which is Mindera, was a pretty interesting discovery. So I've heard of it when it was really small. And what I heard is, okay, this is a company that has no managers. Okay. It seemed like kind of a utopia or even more or less bullshit where they said, okay, you don't need a manager. You'll kind of define your own title. You will collaborate with your team to define the work, and then you can kind of learn with each other and so on. And that kind of made me curious, like how much of this is a selling thing and how much of this is truth. And this is my interesting point. So I've in the past I had worked with pretty good managers and really horrible people managing. So I was interested in the question: do we need a manager at all? Which from all the places that I've worked at, and not only companies, like I've worked in volunteer organizations, all of them have the pretty kind of structured, similar like a pyramid. So I was interested in how else can you kind of build up an organization. And so I joined. So I was like, I want to see this with my own eyes and kind of understand how much of this is just words and how much this is reality. And I joined when I think we were less than 100. And now we're way bigger. We're on the 4 digit. Um, but I guess the interesting part when I arrived was it was very uncomfortable, which surprised me. Okay. So normally I was used to have someone that had had defined my role pretty clearly. So you have to do this, and this are the boundaries of what you can do, what you can't do. And at that point, there didn't seem to be any boundary. Sit down with one of them and ask like, what are the boundaries here? Like, you told me that you don't have managers, that you can define your role. So what are the boundaries? Where can I go up to? Can I hire someone? Can I fire someone? Like, what can I do? And her answer was pretty interesting. So she told me, you can do whatever you can take responsibility of. Example, if we're going to hire someone legally, there needs to be someone signing the papers of that hire. So legally, you cannot do that because you need to have some legal constraints to do that, or a legal role within the company to do that. So of course you can't decide autonomously to hire someone, but um, you can actually, if you identify um, a need that you need someone, you can kind of speak with your team and then start understanding if there's more people that kind of agree with that and have the same vision, and then we can kind of speak with each other, and then if it makes sense, you can actually drive the process of trying to find the right person, and then we'll hire them. So that was a bit strange at first, like, okay, I was trying to wrap my mind around it, and then I was like, okay, but then other other examples. And then she said, okay, you can change how like the rooms are like. So you can shift tables around and do whatever you please. But again, you can do that knowing that you will suffer the consequences. If you do that without speaking with anybody that is being affected, they will really get annoyed because you just did something without speaking with anybody. So if you want to do that, probably it's a better idea to speak with whoever is on that room before you do that. So work like when you're with a group of friends or with a group of people and you're doing something, there's no proper structure, but you actually speak with each other to decide stuff. That's the mindset. If you want to, I can, but I'll pass back into you.
So, developing applications for different businesses, clients or business owners coming to you with their requirements. It can be small scale or middle level or the high level applications or the businesses. So what is your approach for any project that you have done, and how is working for different levels of businesses?
Um, okay, I've worked for very small companies, like one or two people, that had a product, to very huge companies like world leading in retail and telco and so on. So what's different? I guess one common pattern, you don't see it all the time, but is quite frequent, is they know that they want something, but it's not clear in their mind what exactly do they want. So one of the main um, helpful things that you can do is try to, through technology, explain what is possible. So what is within the realm of possibility. So that's one. The second thing is sitting down and having, if you can, a live session. Um, we'd call it normally a sprint zero, for example, which is getting the right people on the room. It can be also virtual, of course, to understand what is the vision, where do we want to be in, 6 months, what is that app leveraging, what is it going to do, and from then, from that vision with the right people, you then can build upon. So you can then, okay, this is it. Then what's the MVP, or what value do you want to take from this? And then you can start building a backlog of the work that you want to do, and break it smaller and smaller until it can be delivered to someone that is actually developing into that. But I guess that's the common, smaller or bigger, you always kind of run through these common steps.
So matching your technical skills with the business requirement, how is that?
Um, I think so. It's For me, it hasn't been very hard normally. I think it depends if you need to, when you're looking at business requirements, you need to step out of your technical head and look at it as a customer, right? So if we're saying, for example, that ideally we should have an app that is fully native and has no web views and so on, technically it makes sense. But probably for business, it makes sense to make it a little faster to market and have, for example, a checkout as a web view. And for the customer, probably at first he won't actually notice a lot of difference because it's the first iteration, for example. So I guess the trick is, forget a little bit when you're looking at business requirements, forget a little bit kind of what is best technically, and first look at it in terms of business. What makes more sense in terms of business? What's going to return more value? And then when you have that vision, then you can go back and see, okay, I know that this will return more value. Does it make sense technically? And then match the two responses into something that makes sense.
And you're also a vice president of sports club.
I'm what? Sorry.
You are also a vice president.
Uh, so you mean like the role that I have, like mobile horizontal lead?
I can see you are vice president of Panthers Esports Club.
I'm not sure that's me. So probably maybe another Pedro Vicente. I don't
Yeah,
think that's on my LinkedIn.
okay. It seems like similar like you, same like Java development and all. So
No,
I can see.
that's not probably me.
So how is this, apart from working in technology, you're doing different, you're part of different communities and you're sharing the knowledge that you have earned.
I guess sharing is natural. So what's the point of learning something if you don't share? So I you can have that. mindset that you'll be leading if you're the only one knowing. I always thought that's a really bad mindset. Uh, First, because everything. So I don't think there's. I was thinking now very fast. If there's any case that I can think of, somebody that can bring more value working alone rather than in a team, and I don't. At least now, I don't think of any example that that's true, and definitely not on software. So if you're sharing with your team and kind of first, then you're getting tools to share more broadly. Is it maybe across a community within your own company, or then bringing it to a community of broad developers? And it only brings kind of benefits. So if you kind of share your vision and your practice and your knowledge, so if you're good enough, people will understand, okay, maybe I want to work with this guy. Maybe I want to go to his company. Maybe I want to learn more about this. Or maybe they have their own problem and they see there a solution. Or maybe they see that I'm wrong and kind of say, okay, you're telling crap. That's not the way to fix it. This is the way. And I learned something. So I don't see any point of not sharing. I think the only reason why sometimes people don't share it's because it gives some. So you need to do some work. So you need to prepare the information properly. You need to think about what you're going to share. So that's what's kind of making a lot of people don't share because it gives you more work. But I see so much benefit in doing that that I don't mind the work.
So, what about feedback? Uh, uh,
Um, so you probably saw I have something called loop gain.
yeah,
Um,
loop gain organization.
yeah, so I have a pretty story on that. So I was working with a team for I guess 6 months or something like that, and we were a small team, like we think uh, three, around 6 or 7 people. So small team that was bootstrapping a huge client in retail. Um, and we were starting to build their mobile app. So we had Android developers, iOS developers, QAEs, product owners. So a lot of different people. And I was in the same table. So I was sitting uh, on a table. On my right, and there was another Android developer, and in front of me it was a QAE. And this was at the way before COVID. We were always at the office. Now I'm at home, but at that point, we were always at the office. And sometimes, mostly every day, when we managed to kind of build something really interesting, we do a pretty stupid thing, was just hitting on the table, and the table would shake, just because we were like, yeah, we did it, and we didn't thought much about it. And I kind of remind you, we were working for 6 months or something at that point. So what I felt at that point, so the company where I work has no evaluation. Okay, so since we don't have no managers, well, that's a longer story, but well, we don't have evaluation, and I was feeling that I was missing not the evaluation in itself, but the feedback from people. Like, how is my work? Do you like working with me? Am I doing okay? Would I be better doing stuff in another way? So I proposed to that team at that point, okay, do you mind if I do a little experiment? Like I said in the beginning, right? I like experimenting. So if you don't mind, you'll borrow me 1 hour of your time and I'll build a little session to improve us as a team. Okay. This might work. This might not work. If you give me 1 hour, we'll try it. If at the end of that hour, it didn't work, you didn't like it, well, I'll call it quits and I'll never bother you again with that. If it works, well, let's see where it leads us to. So we went into that session, and there's kind of the way that the session was built is you needed to answer two questions about everybody else on the team. One was more positive, one was more about improving, how could you improve the team, and another was more personal about yourself. But anyway, cutting it short, one of the questions was what annoys you. Okay, the personal question, what annoys you at work? And that guy, which was sitting in front of me for the last 6 months, when he was asked that, said, okay, you guys really annoy me when you're hitting the table because my monitor shakes for like the next 30 seconds or 1 minute, and it gets into my nerves. And for a couple of seconds, I was kind of completely frozen. Like, we have a good relationship. We go to lunch every day. Why haven't you told me that before? And he was like, I didn't felt it was very important, but you're really telling me that's the thing that annoys you most at your work. Yeah, you actually true. That's actually true, but well, and at that point, I understood that that was something that we're missing as a team. Not only us, but most of the teams that I work with. Do you know what the people around you like the most? Do you know what the people around dislike the most? Do you know if you're doing something that they really bothers them? Because people don't want to offend you nor to kind of call you out. They like you, so that was something that he didn't want to do because it was nothing important. But at that point, when the session ended, everybody was unanimous saying this was really helpful in understanding each other. Okay. So at that point, I figured out, okay, this was really good for us as a team. Would this work in other teams? So I started pinging other people, and they started to hear about this, and slowly other teams started doing that, other teams around us. And the feedback was always, "Ah, this is nice. This has really helped us, but we're only doing this because you're here, because you're facilitating this. If you weren't here, we wouldn't know which questions to use, how to do this. We're not. It's not something that we're comfortable with." And that really bothered me because I wanted to do it at scale. Like, I wanted to help a lot of communities, a lot of teams, and that was, if it only works if I'm there helping, it's it's good for me and my teams, but it's useful for everyone else. So basically, um, I gathered some friends that worked on the design, and my wife worked with me on a set of questions, and we created a deck of cards that now allow any team to do this kind of session for 1 year. So it has enough cards for you to use 1 year, one session per month, and it gets more and more deep into the team. And that was that. So from then I started to understand afterwards, okay, but this works better if I first go there and do a training to the team and explain kind of what are the reasonings behind this, and then they are left with the deck. So then I started to do training. So now I go into charities, ONGs, and so more than actually companies, which is kind of funny, and do this training. So for them to know each other better, for them to kind of work better as a team, and well, this has been fun.
So you have seen the technology evolution. You have seen how software is being made in different times in this 15 years. So what change that you're observing?
Um, First of all, when I started, there was no Stack Overflow, um, And I guess that was one of the big things. Um, and I guess in 5 year time, people are gonna say the same about ChatGPT, like, or something else, like any chatbot that helps with code, and or Copilot on GitHub. So I think the tooling around development has got way better. Like at the beginning, I was developing on an IDE that didn't have code completion when I started at Java. Then I got to Eclipse, NetBeans, and when I jumped into IntelliJ, for example, for JetBrains, it was like mind baffling. Like, whoa, this IDE kind of really points out what's wrong, what's right. He suggested things, and that was kind of really helpful. Then, kind of at the same time, the community run Stack Overflow, like asking questions, getting really answers really fast. That was really helpful. And now you're getting to the next level where actually, if you write the beginning of a function or a method in something that has Copilot, it will probably write you the entire function or method in its own. And then you just need to kind of be sure that that's what you actually want. So I think we're getting our life easier and easier as time passes.
So where we are today and where we are going to do in coming days.
I think we're at an interesting point of the process because with things like Copilot that I just mentioned, um, a lot of people, I think most out of tech, were thinking that developers would run out of a job. So you don't need a developer if you can ask ChatGPT to develop your program to do something. I think what they're missing is a lot of the work of the developer is not just writing code, or at least when we're talking about good engineers, it's understanding what is the problem and then getting the proper solution. And that's something very hard for AI to do, at least now, because it implies how does it scale, what's the architecture, and actually understanding the problem that the customer brings you, right? So you want the app, okay, to sell stuff, okay, but what is kind of your main thing? Do you want to be a mobile first company? Do you want to just increase by 10% the sales through the app? What's your target? Where do you want to go with this? Do you want to have omni-channel, to have app and stores working together? Um, and that's something that I think it's really hard for AI to get kind of the next years. That means understanding people in a way that's way beyond their capacity now, and I think it will take a lot of time to get there. Um, so the future, I think, so now I think we're starting to get more code being written by AI. Um, and when I say code being written by AI, normally they're just kind of getting, so Copilot on GitHub, basically they get that huge pile of code that has already been written and stored at GitHub. And then when you write something similar, they kind of get into the archive. Like I'm speaking not exactly how it works, but in very simple terms, right? So it gets into that archive and gets something that's similar and then writes you the code that's similar enough. Okay. It's really similar. But I think the biggest leap is, can AI actually write me a functional app that is different from everything that is currently written doing X or Y? That's something that I think is the future, and I'm really interested in seeing how that will, or what does that lead to. But I think that's years away.
And can you share your online presence to my audience so that they can follow you and they can learn from you?
Yeah, so you can go to twitter.com, for example, and search for Net Einstein, the username, or neteinstein.org, also my website. So I think from those two, you'll get kind of my presentations, what I'm doing, the framework that I shared, like Loop Game. You also have links to there, so from there you'll find wherever you want to search for.
So at last, what is your observation about my work? Have you seen any videos of mine on YouTube?
I've seen a couple. So I've seen a couple when you first reached me. I guess more than I always think a conversation is valuable because you might learn something. So that's what I was. That's why I accepted your invitation, saying, "Okay, this might be interesting. I might learn something, and let's see how it goes." So basically, that was it. I didn't know you before you reached me out in Twitter, but yeah, that was mainly it.
So what is your observation about it? Me are talking with different experts from different parts
I
of the
think
world.
I think it can be interesting. So you can get people that are not very kind of famous, I'd call it. Like now, I think one of the things that gets today, that is what trend that is happening, is you have a lot of influencers. And influencers are people that are producing a lot of content, either to YouTube or any social platform, but they're producing entertainment content. That's uh, something that's not necessarily for you to learn something uh, about. It's more to entertain you. You can learn actually, but a lot of times you don't. It's just fun. So if you're focusing on stuff that is more something people that can learn or think about, that's interesting niche that I think might be interesting for people.
So I've done masters in software engineering, also bachelors in computer science and engineering. Right now I'm doing some DevOps projects. Uh, and this is a project, this is a channel where I'm taking interviews of different experts from different parts of the world who are into different levels and who are into different fields, not only technology, also non-technology people who belongs to police department or authors or psychologists, doctors, non-technical people also I'm trying to interview. But my background, my field is completely technology. And
Hmm.
also I interviewed vice president of Amazon Web Services from US. So, and also a lot of people from Microsoft who are solutions architects, who are DevOps engineers, and who are software developers, engineers, who worked in industry for 30 years, 20 years, 12 years. So, different experiences. So me, because you have been in technology for 15 plus years, you have worked in different types of applications which belongs to different businesses, and I'm sure for doing this, you might have interacted with a lot of people in order to make this happen. So, with that experience, how do you define or what kind of feedback that you give for my work? How this experts talk or this communication system that I have created, how this experience is going to helpful for me in my career?
Um, so in terms of how it's going to be helpful, so I think for any career, if you speak with a very large community of people or very different people, you'll get really different points of view and different approaches to life and different attitudes. And that's helpful for you to first understand what is yours, and then and I speak kind of in terms of life, work, and whatever, it's broad in the broad sense. And then first understand if you're certain what yours is, and then kind of also question kind of is so I don't know, you're speaking about DevOps. Is this, so imagine that you've been hearing me and you're now curious about it opens a little bit your in whatever career you're at. So speaking with different people, I think is always valuable if they're willing to share.
So can I put this video on my YouTube channel with your permission?
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Also, can I put this audio and video clip on my podcast, website, internet, social media, everywhere with your permission?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Feel free.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Pedro, for giving me your valuable time and sharing some of your experiences.
No worries. It was a pleasure. Nice to meet you. And well, hoping all success to you.
Thank you, sir. You too.
Bye
Bye.
bye.